Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing really well out there today. Now, if you've been following this channel for a while, you've seen me cover OpenMediaVault 5, 6, and 7, at least to some degree, and now I'm working on putting together a series of videos covering OpenMediaVault, or OMV 8. Now, if you've never heard of OpenMediaVault, before this video, basically OpenMediaVault is a free open source NAS, or network attached storage operating system built on Debian Linux. You install it on a dedicated machine, and it turns that machine into a network attached storage server that you can manage almost entirely in a web browser. Now, this means no command line required for day-to-day use. It's a great option if you want a self-hosted, privacy-respecting alternative to something like Synology without the price tag. And if that sounds interesting, I'll link earlier videos in the video description. Now, a couple of things before we get into this. First, this video is going to be more or less a talking head video giving an overview of OMV8, officially named Synchrony. And when we get into talking about what's new, I want to set some expectations here because the developer was actually pretty upfront about this in the release notes. The feature list for OMV8 is intentionally on the shorter side. The reason for this is interesting, and I'll explain it, but the short version is that this is more of a solid platform refresh than it is a feature-packed major release. So let's dig in. Now, the biggest change under the hood here is that OMV8 is built on Debian 13, which is codenamed Trixie. If you've been following Debian releases, you know the pattern. Debian stable is rock solid, and upgrading to a new base is a pretty significant undertaking for any project that's built on top of it. So what does that mean for you, practically speaking? Well, you're getting a new kernel, updated system libraries, newer versions of core packages like Samba, rsync, and OpenSSH, and the long-term security support that comes with a fresh Debian stable release. And for a NAS OS that you're going to be leaving running for years, that foundation matters a lot. The kernel bump that comes with Debian 13 is especially relevant if you're running newer hardware. Things like better NVMe support, improved driver coverage for newer network cards, and general performance improvements that come along for the ride. Now, you're not configuring any of that manually, you just get to benefit from it. Okay, so here's the part that's going to affect some of you directly, so I want to be very clear about it. Starting with OMV8, only AMD 64 and ARM 64 architectures are supported. That means if you're running OMV on a 32-bit system or anything outside those two architectures, you are stuck on OMV 7. That's not a knock. OMV 7 is a solid release and will continue to receive updates for a while, but you won't be making the jump to OMV 8. For most of you watching this, you're probably on a standard x86 desktop or server build, or an ARM 64 device like a Raspberry Pi 4 or 5 or an Orange Pi or a Rock chipboard, something along those lines, and you're fine. But if you've got an old 32-bit box repurposed as a NAS, just be aware of where you stand. And this is actually why the OMV8 feature list is shorter than you might expect for a major version bump. Because the architecture change was known well in advance, the developers actually backported a lot of the planned OMV8 features into OMV7, so that the users on those discontinued architectures could still benefit from them before support ended, which is actually pretty thoughtful. So now let's talk about what's actually new in OMV8 in no particular order. The old CPU Freak Utils package has been replaced with Linux CPU Power, which is more modern and better maintained. As of the 8.0.9 update, OMV now defaults to the Performance CPU Governor on AMD 64 systems and Schedule Util on other architectures. If you want to customize the governor, there's an environment variable for that. And in the 8.1.0, they expanded the CPU frequency monitoring in the UI. So if you upgrade, go check your power management settings page and update your config there. There's also a performance improvement in the RPCs. That's the backend calls that handle user and group management. Previously, loading users always fetched the full detail on every entry, which could get slow. Now, it returns basic info by default and only fetches the full detail when needed. The result should be noticeably snappy response times in the UI, when working with users. Now, if you're a developer building on the OMV API, heads up, the behavior for those RPC calls changed, so definitely check the docs on that. Next, we've got better feedback when applying configuration changes. Now, this may seem small, but it's actually pretty useful. After you hit apply and OMV pushes out the config changes, the notification now tells you which modules were updated. Previously, it was just a generic confirmation, and now you actually get visibility as far as what is being changed. On the update page, you can now see the version that you're upgrading from alongside the version that you're upgrading to. Again, this is a small change, but it's the kind of detail that tech-savvy users appreciate. You want to know what you're changing, not just that something is changing. OMV 8 also now supports WPA3 authentication for wireless network connections. So if you're running OMV on something like a Pi or a mini PC connected over Wi-Fi rather than Ethernet, you can now use WPA3 networks. This isn't going to be everybody's use case, but it's definitely a welcome addition. For anyone using OMV as a time machine target for Mac OS, you can now limit the reported disk size on a per share basis. This means that you can tell Mac OS this time machine backup target only has 2 terabytes available, even if the underlying share has more. And this stops Time Machine from gobbling up your entire array, which is also another welcome update. OMV 8 also added explicit support for network interfaces connected via USB. This is likely more relevant for single-board computers that might be using a USB dongle for networking, but it's definitely another nice to have. Next, we've got a tiny cosmetic update. You can now hide the background image on the login page. Look, this isn't groundbreaking, but if you like a clean, minimal login screen, it's there now. Now, if you're on OMV 7 and want to move to 8, the upgrade path is the OMV release upgrade command from the command line. It's the same approach they've used for previous major version upgrades. As always, be sure to back up everything before you run this command, including your OMV config, because a base OS upgrade is not something that you want to do without a safety net. If you're going to do a fresh install, you can grab the ISO from SourceForge or install on a Debian 13 system following the docs. And after install, you can run OMV upgrade to pull in the latest package versions, but we will cover all of that, or at least some of that, in an upcoming video, so be sure to get subscribed for that. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what didn't change because I think it matters for how you evaluate this release. The core OMV experience is the same. You've got your familiar web UI, Samba shares, FTP, SSH, sync jobs, smart monitoring, RAID management, and the plugin ecosystem through OMV Extras. All of that is still intact. The OpenMediaVault Compose plugin for Docker Compose is still your main path for running containerized apps. The S3 plugin was actually removed because its upstream development stopped. They recommend running it as a container via Compose instead. The dashboard, the shared folder workflow, the user and permission model, nothing weird changed there. So if you've used OMV 7, you'll feel right at home in OMV 8 within just a couple of minutes. So, is OMV 8 worth upgrading to? Well, I'd like to say yes, but with some nuance. If you're on supported hardware, moving to a Debian 13 base is a smart long-term move. You get a new kernel, better hardware support going forward, and the security benefits of a fresh, stable release. But if you're on 32-bit hardware, stay on 7 and keep it updated because it is still supported. And if you're coming from OMV 5 or 6, jumping to 8 is a bigger jump and you'll notice more change. A lot of what landed in OMV 6 and 7 will feel new to you. Okay, so that is the rundown on OpenMediaVault 8 Synchrony. I'll have a full install and walkthrough coming up with a series of videos, so be sure to get subscribed if you don't want to miss that. Be sure to drop your questions in the comments, especially if you're on one of those older architectures and wondering about your options. So I think with all of that said, I'm going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys for spending a few minutes of your day with me here today, and I'll talk to you in the next video.